That's it. Now, get my point across. That's what I want to see. All right. So my topic is the Jew refuses to be the house slave and the world is shaking. All right? Things turned upside down. One of the pioneering movies of the early film industry, I mean, this is Hollywood Temple Bethel, so we're tied in very much to the film industry, was called Birth of a Nation by W Grifftih, really a great filmmaker who talked about how America was shaped, but from the perspective of what? In it, the African Americans who had been subject to the horrible slavery for centuries had finally been freed, were now depicted as the evil ones. And of course, behind those slaves was the even more evil, the Northerners. That's his theme. And there was the former slaveholders who now rose up against these freed slaves and are now the heroes of the awakening American nation, the Ku Klux Klan. So this great filmmaker turned the story on its head, and he successfully turned the heroes into villains and the villains into heroes. And it gives me a sense of what's happening to us as Jews today. I read the image that is being broadcast to the world by violent riots of pro-Palestinian groups, what is being spread on TikTok. By the way, did you see bin Laden spread? I read the text. The United States responsible for killings in Somalia. We came in to try to save the Somalis. Responsible for the killings of... Who paid to get the Russians out of Afghanistan? We did. Okay. It's all lies. So people buying it hook, line, and sinker because they see it on TikTok, they don't know how to evaluate. And all the like. And I say, we Jews have been history's victims are now being portrayed as history's villains. So I've got to get back to being history's victims where we were for 2,000 years. Actually, even before, the Bible already hints at the problem about being a minority in a foreign land. When Joseph is in captivity in Egypt, all right, Potiphar's wife harps to the people, this Hebrew who came to play with us, mitzachek banu, means sexual rape, right, came to play with us. And Pharaoh then claims a little bit later, they have become too numerous and powerful, they'll join the enemy and rise up against us and leave us, right? The famous story of Pharaoh enslaving the Jews. And so just like G.W. Griffiths, also the ancient Egyptian writers also tried to blame the Israelite slaves for trying to take over Egypt. You read the ancient Egyptian sources, Josephus repeats them. It was really these Hebrews had come in and tried to take over Egypt, and we Egyptians successfully defeated them and chased them out. Okay, that's long before D.W. Griffith, long before Hamas, long before Christianity, right? It predates even the start of Christianity, say, but even the blood libel, it was by supporters of Antiochus against the Jews who, they said, would take a Greek and hold him for sacrifice. They needed his blood. Very ancient. And the theological foundations for the continued enslavement and denigration of Jews starts with the Roman Empire. Well, it's still pagan. And then it continues with the rise of the successor to Judaism, which was Christianity. Now, I'm talking about Christianity then. There's a big change since in the last few decades. But what it was historically, it saw itself as the successor and therefore didn't need Jews, didn't need Judaism. And what started as an internal conflict among Jews between the small group of Jesus followers and the majority of Jews evolved into a race by those followers of Jesus to put as big a distance between them and the Jews as possible because of the Roman Empire, which was fed up about Jews in its wars in the years 70 and 135. And the early Christians wanted to avoid, like the plague, any connection with these Jews. And so they started to turn the Christian texts into accusations against the Jews. That's where we have the text as it is now, reflecting this attempt by the early Christians to get as far away from Jews as possible. And so all the blame is fixed on the Jews, like the crucifixion. The people answered, his blood be on us and on our children, right? That's an example of interpolation by later Christians to show the Romans, we're loyal, not those Jews. And then the Jews endowed with demonic attributes. You belong to your father, the devil. It's from John. And you carry out your father's desires, right? Your father is the devil. They want as much distance between them and Jews as possible, and they're in the process of taking over the Roman Empire. So we have this accusation, deicide, right? God killer, Christ killer, and the Jew is condemned to eternal wandering, the eternal Jew, and it becomes the motif of Western civilization, one of the major motifs of Western civilization, till we come to modern times. It's inflamed by the early church thinkers. like John Chrysostom, who said against the Jews, although such beasts are unfit for work, they are fit for killing. They grew fit for slaughter. And this then became fixed in Roman law. The Code of Theodosius 404, Jews were excluded from certain government posts. 418, barred from the civil service, from military positions. 425, excluded from all remaining public offices, both civilian and military. And this was reinforced within Justinian. It reminds us of the Nuremberg laws, 1935, the Nuremberg laws, very similar. Infidels. Yeah, we get caught in the middle. Oh, I'm going to get into that. So it continues. There are different periods, there are ups and downs, but by the 1215, the Lateran Council within the Catholic Church decided to enforce the wearing of distinctive clothes by Jews, including the yellow badge, which the Nazis later brought back. And the yellow badge itself, I'll mention again later on, comes from Islam. It's used by Muslims to subjugate the Jews. So subjugation of Jews are allowed to live only in order to bear witness to Christianity. That's why they let Jews stay. And it continues till the beginnings of what we call early modern times. So think about this. For example, the father of the Protestant Reformation, and this is one of the greatest thinkers of early modern history. He single-handedly broke the power of the Catholic Church. He ushered in the modern era of the idea of the centrality of individual conscience, that religion would be separate from the religion of the ruler. Martin Luther. And modern civilization is not possible without Martin Luther. Himself, he was the author of a miserable work on the Jews, wegen der Juden und ihrer Ligen, on the Jews and their lies, and that work was then republished many times under the Third Reich to encourage the Germans, using this great thinker as the foundation for the Jew hatred. So he says, be on your guard against Jews, knowing that wherever they have their synagogues, nothing is found but a den of devils in which sheer self-glory, conceit, lies, blasphemy, and defaming of God and men, practiced most maliciously and vehemently with his eyes on them. Right? So Jews were tolerated in Europe, right? They were useful to the rulers. They would be tolerated. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire was the legal successor to the Roman emperors, and therefore he claimed the right of possession and protection over all the Jews in the former empire. I own you, I protect you because you're my property, but I own you. So Jews had the status of servi camerae regis. So that's Latin for servants of the royal chamber. But the word servi means basically slave of the royal chamber. Similarly, when the Norman conquerors came in, they were brought in as the property of the king. The word chattel, my personal property. So as the king's property, they could not be harmed by the mobs, although they were, but also as property, they could be disposed of as trash when no longer useful. At best, the Jew could live as a bird in a gilded cage. Right? So Jews could rise to high prosperity. It was a gilded cage, still a cage. When the Jew became too useful for the royalty and the crowds were there aroused against the royalty, the Jew was dispatched. For example, here's Joseph Süß Oppenheimer, Yud Süß, the Jew Süß, who was the financier for the king, I think is Wittenberg. And when the king died, his enemies, Wittenberg. So here is the memorial of Joseph Süß Oppenheimer. And then it has it's like German slang of that period, saying he was miserable, lousy, rotten. He was hung up and left up for many years for everyone to see. That's the gilded cage turns into a real cage. So you could only go so far till you're hung. And we enter the modern era of the West. Our status as free and equal citizens was given slowly and only and grudgingly, and often taken back, as in the Nuremberg laws. Right? Comparable to Yuzis, the man who built the treasury for Castile and Aragon, made possible to rebuild the beginnings of modern Spain. Don Isaacar Bravanel is kicked out of the country when it's time to get rid of the Jews. So we come into the modern era. Nobody's a believer anymore. Everybody's a free thinker. This old hatred of Jews, killer of God, is no longer possible because God doesn't exist. So you have to have a new excuse. So it's given a leftist class basis under Karl Marx, who built his Das Kapital actually on this theory about on the Jewish question, zu den Judenfrage, and therefore he wrote this before Das Kapital. In the final analysis, the emancipation of the Jews is the emancipation of mankind from Judaism. What is that? Practical need, egoism. The social emancipation of the Jew is the emancipation of society from Judaism. Here is a man, descendant of rabbis, who is so imbued in himself the mentality of the Christian West that he turns his vehemence against fellow Jews. Of course, he sponged off of his wife, who was of nobility, and of his partner Engel, who was a capitalist, whereas his former partner, Moses Hess, actually married a poor street prostitute because he believed in equality. And then he went on to write the first book of Zionism, not like Marx, who sponged off of his wealthy patrons. So then it turned into a rightist version also, where instead of class, it is race and nation, but it's the same theme. And it was turned, and this is in reflection of Marx's phrasing, Judenfrage, Endlösung zur Judenfrage, the final solution for the Jewish question, right? It was the Nazi term for it. When they would get rid of the Jews, we have no Jewish problem. It's an aspiration, like from river to sea. It's just an aspiration. Vital to note. Now, I have to say, modern Christians have changed greatly in their preachings, especially the Catholic Church. It's unrecognizable, I will say this. It was in the process before the Holocaust, certainly after the Holocaust, greatly changed. Also, Protestant denominations, major Protestant denominations, many openly Zionist. And it is rare indeed to find an anti-Semite of religious conviction in the Christian world today. But Christianity today, as it is in Europe, for example, is fading. It's a fading force. In the United States, it's still there, but it's not the only force as it was. So, ironically, just as Christianity has shifted away from its Judeophobic roots and has relinquished its successionist outlook, successionist, not secessionist, and has lost its power as well, the Muslim world, partly in reaction to modernism, and partly out of feeling sat upon by the upstart European Christians who used to be their slaves, is doubled down on Jews. The status of the Jew as the devil reared its ugly head even before the context of Israel and Zionism in the Middle East. It has only been claimed that Jews fared better under Islam than under Christianity. And it has its merits, but is all relative and not absolute. Relative and not absolute. Muhammad rose to power, we go back to its roots. He rose to power with Jewish allies, but when they failed to back him completely and accept him as the Ras al-Nabi, the head of all prophets, he turned on them. So what starts because of a power struggle later became inflamed into a fight between Islam and Judaism. So he may not have meant all Jews at all times, but his followers did. So say the people of the book, whomsoever God is cursed, with whom he is wroth, have made some of them apes and swines and worshippers of idols. And another quote, he's brought down those people of the book who supported them from their fortresses, cast terror in their hearts. Some you slew, some you made captive. God is powerful over everything. Right? Just two sample quotes. Now, it may have been said by Muhammad in his fight for supremacy over the Arabian tribes. There are scholars who think that Muhammad actually wanted to be in alliance with Jews. So these are later insertions, possible. But whatever it is, those verses lent themselves very easily to actual demonization of the Jews. And it became the justification, by the way, Muhammad's actions for lying about the intentions of the Oslo Accords by Arafat. Right? So he gave a speech, and it was recorded in a private meeting in Johannesburg with representatives there of the PLO and other organizations favorable to them. And he says, look, this agreement, I'm not considering it more than the agreement which had been signed between our Prophet Muhammad and the Quraysh, the Jewish tribes. And you remember the Caliph Omar refused this agreement and considered sulh hadania, a despicable truce. But Muhammad accepted it. We're accepting this now, this Oslo Peace Accord. In other words, hint, hint, it was Muhammad's agreement. So what was Muhammad's agreement? Oh, those who know Islamic history understand that what he's saying is that this treaty, also known as Hudaybiyah Treaty, called for a 10-year truce, not peace, but truce. And it was broken by Muhammad in 2 years. And all those people that signed this truce with him were all slaughtered. So Arafat was hinting to his followers that these accords too were like Muhammad's truce, piece of paper, nothing more. So what about restrictions. Muhammad had put restrictions on Jewish tribes he conquered. They were reinforced and increased in the hadith, the oral traditions, especially one al-Bukhari, who is the authority behind most of the extremist elements in Islam today. And so his line is in the charter of Hamas, which they never canceled. They came out with a new charter for whitewashing, but they never really tore up their old charter. It says judgment will not come about till Muslims fight the Jews, and the Jews will hide behind stones and trees. All right, oh, it's a famous line there. So it's been reinforced. So I ask historians, what about, still Islamic tolerance? Because everybody tells Islam's a religion of peace, Islam's a religion of tolerance. Was it true in history? Again, their existence from Morocco to Iran was punctuated by misery, humiliation, and popular violence. The greatest of medieval Jewish philosophers, Maimonides, would say the nation of Ishmael persecuted us severely and devised ways to harm us and debase us. Muhammad had to escape his native Cordoba to Morocco and then to Egypt because Jews were persecuted in Spain by the Muslims. We talk about the Golden Age, it wasn't all gold. The legal status of Jews and Christians, this is from Wistridge, that of dhimmi, protected peoples, as religions officially recognized by the authorities. Right, so they're given recognition. You had to pay a poll tax, jizya. They could freely practice their faith and got a certain degree of personal security, have their own communal organizations. But the protection for these peoples of the book, Ahl al-Kitab, was combined with subjugation. You were protected, but you were low. The tolerance they benefited from existed within a social framework of discrimination and disabilities, constantly emphasized the superiority of the Muslims to both Jews and Christians. Jews could not, for example, bear arms. There's one exception, Jews in the Hadramaut. It's the Habani Jews, one tribe of Jews that did wear arms, and they were hired as bodyguards to King Abdullah, but that's a weird exception. They could not ride horses. My friend tells me the story of his father, who was caught riding a horse. He and his brother were riding a horse. They were immediately arrested. The father and the son put into jail. So the father said, "Look, hold the son, that's his father and the little brother." The father says, "Hold my little brother as collateral. I'll pay you your bakshish, your bribe money, and come back." So he runs back with money, gets the younger brother out of the jail. That's the law in Yemen into the 20th century, and that's the Houthis who are now trying to take over Yemen. Same people. So they're required to wear distinctive clothing. I mentioned the yellow badge, started in Baghdad. Forbidden to build new places of worship. Synagogue could never, by those way, churches could never be higher than a mosque. The dhimmi status meant that Jews are often considered impure, word najis. Iranians know that very well. They had to be segregated from the Muslim community. Entering to holy Muslim towns, mosques, public baths, and certain streets was forbidden. Even the turbans, the costumes, the appearance of the wives' servants had to be different from those of Muslims, so they could distinguish and humiliate them. The dhimmi could never be allowed to forget that they were inferior beings. Even the Golden Age of Spain, as I mentioned, pogroms in Cordoba and Granada, forced conversions and expulsions as under the Almohades. That's how Muhammad and Maimonides ended up in Egypt. Jews were exiled from the capital of Yemen, Sana'a, so it's known as the Galut Mauza, 1600. In Yemen, Jews were not allowed to live inside the city walls. City walls were designed to protect you from brigands and marauders. They were left to live outside the walls, so that if they were brigands, they would attack the Jews first. In Iran, till the reign of the Shah, there were harsh laws restricting Jews, and there was forced conversion in Isfahan, 1600s, Mashhad in the 1800s. Many people in the Jewish community here, the Iranian Jewish community, descendants of some Jews who were forcibly converted to Islam. Now, it's true that these laws apply to Christians as well. However, as Europe became increasingly powerful, especially after the Reconquista of Spain, developed naval power and military power that could push back the Islam and the Muslim forces, local Christians could count on protection from the European protectors. Jews had no protectors. Right? So there's a Christian quarter here, Christian quarter there. The Italians would take charge, the French would take charge, the British. There was nobody to take charge for the Jews. Even into the beginnings of the modern era, into the 20th century, one can find the enforcement of what's called the orphans law in Islam. As in Yemen, every child born is born a Muslim, and it is only the parents who misguide the baby. Therefore, when a child becomes an orphan, he or she now belongs to the local ruler, not to the Jewish community, but the local ruler is taken from the family and is raised as a Muslim by force. The only exception would be for those who are already married, because then they had family, theoretically. Therefore, in Yemen, it was common to arrange for child marriage, prevent the child from being kidnapped. This was true in my wife's family. Members of the family, they had to be married off childhood when they became orphaned. Otherwise, they would be kidnapped from the family. I fear for those who are in captivity, because Hamas follows Sharia law, which means that if among those children there are orphans, they are now Muslims. They're not going to give them back. That's what I suspect. Even till today, into the recent years, Islam allows for negotiated settlement between families of murderer and murdered in lieu of death penalty. So in Iran, I think that finally they changed it, but it was that the price for a Jew was far less than the price for a Christian or Muslim. And I think it was all till this century in Iran. So we come into the modern era. All right, the Islamic world is influenced by trends for good and for bad with Europe, and regarding Jews, the worst of the left and the right. For example, the idea of nationalist anti-Semitism. Now, we talk about anti-Semitism invented by a German, William Barr, described as new movement. It's an attack on Jews and as an alien race, but was never meant as an attack on Arabs. Quite the contrary, if you read some of the early anti-Semitic tracts, the Arabs are a noble race. They're not to be considered like the Jews. It's not intended against Arabs. So Jews as a distinct and permanently alien nation has no place inside the host nation. And Theodor Herzl understood this very well, and the nascent nationalisms of the Arab world understood this well. It's no wonder the Mufti of Jerusalem could feel comfortable at a tete-a-tete with Adolf Hitler and lead the Bosnian SS during World War II. Hitler was not anti-Arab. He was anti-Semite, meaning Jew, but not anti-Arab. So what was a distinctly European form of anti-Semitism found fertile soil in the rising Arab nationalism. It sees the Jew as the alien. The Jew had lived among them for thousands of years and more, is now the alien. So riots break out against Jews, not just in pre-state Palestine, but around the Arab world, such as the Farhud in Baghdad. And there's an increasing denial of rights to Jews in the newly freed colonies of North Africa, for example. So I have here Albert Memmi, the great ideologist of Tunisian independence, colleague of Frantz Fanon, the man who said violence against the colonialists is always justified. And he said, we would have liked to be Arab Jews if we abandoned the ideas, because over the centuries, the Muslim Arabs systematically prevented its realization by their contempt and cruelty. It's now too late for us to become Arab Jews. Not only were the homes of Jews in Germany and Poland turned down, scattered to the four winds, demolished, but our homes as well. Never, I repeat, never, with a possible exception of two or three very specific intervals, such as the Andalusian, and not even then did the Jews in Arab lands live in other than a humiliated state, vulnerable, periodically mistreated and murdered, so they could clearly remember their place. So, like Yudzis in Germany, Jews in Arab lands at best were in a gilded cage. They were Jews that achieved prominence, but that gilded cage could turn into a hanging, like this in Baghdad. Right? Leaders of the Jewish community. This was 1969, but even before that, leaders of the Jewish community captured and hung in public. The Iranians, our fellow Iranians, if any of you are listening, also, we know personally many of the leaders of the Iranian Jewish community, when Khomeini took over, were hung. Right? That's it. That's the gilded cage. You live in a gilded cage, you are dumped when the owner is tired of you. So now I look at the historic response of the Jewish desire to return to the land of Israel. Set aside the claim that to do so meant the displacement of the existing Arabs of land that was designated as Palestine. The land itself was underpopulated and neglected after centuries of Ottoman rule. When Jews came in, prosperity came with it, and the Arab population increased in tandem. And frankly, the land had only a few 100,000 people, and now between the two sides, there's 10, 15 million people in a land that was supposed to be fully populated then. It was way underpopulated. So why was there so much vehemence to an autonomous Jewish territory in the midst of what would be the great Arab awakening of dozens of countries from North Africa to Central Asia? Why so much vehemence? This great Arab awakening would have benefited so much from the influx of skilled and educated population with Jewish financial connections as well for industry. The only comparison that I can think of is the vehement reaction of the Southern whites to the newly freed slaves. I go back to the W Grifftih movie, Birth of a Nation. Suddenly, the very people upon whom the white master stepped on so easily in antebellum South could be free and independent, and this raised the hackle of the former slaveholders. They had indulged themselves in a sense of superiority, and now the tables were turned. So the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and as they were seen as defense of white supremacy, newly freed black was soon put back in his place by force of Jim Crow laws. I can only see the response of the Arab world in the early Zionist movement in the same as the reaction of the early white supremacists. And we have to understand that. This Arab reaction against Jews is the action of the white supremacists against blacks. Don't try to flip the tables and tell me the European, they're defending themselves against white supremacy. It is the opposite. They were the rulers. The Jews were the slaves. So here we were Jews, the former dhimmi, the former lowly inferior Jews acting like equals. Forget about superiors, acting like equals. It's no wonder the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, was vehemently a Jew hater. The Mufti of Jerusalem could be at home with Adolf Hitler, or bin Laden, vehemently anti-Semitic. Right? No wonder. So the horrors unleashed on the Israelis on October 7th can only be understood in the light of a visceral reaction to the once superior Arabs now having to deal with the upstart and uppity former slaves. I can understand the depths of anger the former master holds against his newly liberated slave. Huh? He's been upended. It's what's called in sociology déclassé. He's fallen down, and that's the rise. That's one of the factors in the rise of fascism. But, so it falls from a position of superiority to a lower level. It gives rise to fascism. So what I can't understand is why intelligent, enlightened people, the product of Western civilization, as Yoni, as you mentioned, the college students here, would side with the masters of the Middle East and not with the newly freed and emancipated Jew. It's like siding with the KKK in the Birth of a Nation movie. And here, my image, KKK gathering and Hamas gathering. It's one and the same. Quod errant disputandum, I've made my case. I rest my case. Yeah. No. What does she say? Yeah. There's been so much going on, so I'm not sure. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see if I can do it. Michelle Munch, United Nations. Yeah, I'm trying to find it here. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I know what it is. Wunsch with the W. Michelle Wunsch, United Nations. I got Charles of the United Nations. Let me try again. Michelle Wunsch, United Nations. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, Michelle, murder of Jews ceasefire. Special envoy on anti-Semitism. I have her being interviewed. I'm not sure if that's the one that you're talking about. Let me see. There she's doing an interview. It's not the. Okay. No, I can't. I can't really put it up here. I don't have the. Michal. Okay. All right, let me just try this. Let me see if I can pull it up and then yeah, give it one try, one more try. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I'll put it up just so we can know, so if people want to follow, they can follow it. Did you send it? I didn't to Rabbi Weinberg or to let's try again. Let's see. No, it didn't come through. Mm, all right, all right. So I'm going to just recommend to everybody, see if you can find it. Michelle Wunsch. There are a lot of great speeches. Are they moving the head? Our big factor, the big factor is not the United Nations, the big factor is the United States. And the pro-Palestinian marches are very vehement and very vocal. I mean, we were very happy to have 300,000 in Washington, but that's sort of a one-shot deal. I know tomorrow evening there's a gathering at Sinai Temple for all the synagogues. So but in my thinking, if it's inside a synagogue and nobody sees it, that's not what we need. I need the world to see us. No, Richard was involved in the march. He was part of the organization that was pushing the march. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Oh, let's see if I can find it. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. This is. I'm going to put this up for 1 second for everybody. I'm going to share it. Yeah. I'm going to share this briefly. Let's see if it's coming out. Okay. All right. How about if I do share start with? Hold on. Okay. I'll do sound. Let's see.
Clear.
Yeah, I'm just going to
That
put
is what is alive and well on university campuses, online, in the streets. Zionism is racism. Soviet propaganda has become, in the name of progress, a mainstream, legitimate, mutated form of an ever-mutating hatred of Jews that was enabled by silence. Zionism.
Okay. So it's a long presentation, 20 minutes, but we now see it. So people will see the link online and they can then go into it themselves. Okay, because it's a long video. Okay, so as Barbara says, "Was neu?" What else is new? Yeah, when somebody in the Jewish Journal, there's an article. The guy said about how many Jews are there, and he said even after we've recovered to some extent from the Holocaust, there's 15, 17 million, something like that. It says in proportion to the world, if you got a whole bunch of people in the room, you got 500 people in the room, you'd have so many dozens for China, so many dozens for the United States, and then you'd have one Jew out of 500. We're the one out of 500. The whole world is fixated on us. The whole world is fixated on us, right? Can't you get your medications from somebody else? Can't you get your computer systems from somebody else? Can't you get your weapon systems from somebody else? Can't you get your political systems from somebody else? Can't you get your psychiatrists from somebody else? Huh? Why Jews? 1 out of 500. Can't you find somebody else to do things for you that you can't do? Is that it? Why do you need Einstein from us? Can't you do it yourselves? Why do you need Freud from us? Why do you need Marx from us? 1 out of 500. 1 out of 500. Go find someone else to pick on. That's it. We're just trying to keep ourselves alive and going. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, everybody's still upset. Everybody's still upset. I listen to the Israeli news reports, and everybody's venting on all sides. And there's a large push to try to get the hostages home at any cost. I don't know how effective it would be. And I don't think people who are pushing for it actually are being very specific what they expect in exchange or how it will be done. They just don't want the government to give up on that. That's really what they're afraid of. The government was so focused on getting rid of Hamas, they just give up on the hostages, which is a big fear. It's a big, understandable fear. When the dust settles, that's when the accounts will be taken. But what they are seeing is that the antagonists are no longer completely antagonistic. Suddenly, the Hasidim and the Haredim are seen as part of Israel, and the secular is seen by the Haredim as part of Israel. So there's some things that may be very important. We're all in the same boat together. So that may be something very important for the people of Israel. What is different from their neighbors is that on Israeli TV, you can get comedy attacking the government. You can get satire making fun of the government. You can have making fun of everybody, and nobody gets shut down for it, and nobody gets banned for it, and nobody gets executed for it. Let's see that happen. I haven't heard of anything like that on Palestinian TV, where they'd be making fun of Muhammad Abbas and still being alive, or make fun of Yahya Sinwar or the others and still be alive. That's the big difference. Big difference, big time. Now, yeah. Oh, Europe is vicious. Yeah. Yeah. No, we can make fun of our leaders and not get executed, right? They can. Okay, we're reminded people are hungry. I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom and good health and well-being. Thanksgiving, Shabbat next week. Please let us know as soon as possible that you'll come and send in your payment. Everybody is expected, and please send your contribution in. Okay, good. Shabbat Shalom. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Joe's 101. I think we're gonna call Joe. Okay, gonna make a college course. Introduction to Life 101. Joe, come on. Yeah.